Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be doing issues 11 to 20 of Warhammer Imperium Painted. Now issue 11 came with the Phobos Librarian, or a librarian I should say, in Phobos armor. Now it was an interesting issue because it does delve into a little bit of lore on the librarian themselves, some of their background, but it also touches on some of the Necron magic in the issue as well. It also comes with the usual build and paint guides, and there's an interesting mission here, of course, at the end, where your librarian gets to do some of his actual battles in the scenario. But enough of the magazine, let's have a look at the model itself. Now the model itself is a beautiful looking model, I have to say. It was fun to paint and assemble, and it's a very dynamic pose. Now one of the things that always struck me about librarians is how kind of gaudy and ostentatious they are. I mean, they're covered in gold, have big massive kind of staffs and whatnot. This guy doesn't. He has cool grey robes, he has one book on his back, and he has a kind of a sword, like he's bracing himself against the wind or the psychic backlash. A very, very brilliantly sculpted model, and it was great fun to paint. The only problem I had with it was the grey armour. I'm a very average painter, so I found it difficult to try and highlight the grey armour without kind of making it too gaudy, but also trying to kind of subtle the effect as well. However, better painters than me will have a great time with this, and one of the nice little touches as well, as I thought, was the armour also covers the top of his backpack here. So a lot of love was put into this sculpture, and this is the model that comes with issue 11 of Warhammer Imperium. Now issue 12 only came with 3 paints, but it did come with some interesting information on the Necrons themselves, in which you have weapon and war gear names, a bit of information on Imperium Nihilus, which is where a lot of these scenarios take place, and it gives you a little bit of blurb on chapter planets as well as chaos demons, a bit of an introduction to what those things are. Issue 13, however, is where the Warhammer Imperium gets interesting again, because it comes with a section of assault intercessors. Now these are basically Primaris Marines armed with chainswords, and they're fairly nasty bios. Now as you can see, it comes with 5 of them. It also comes with a bit of Necron lore, where it talks about the search of immortality, which is basically the background for the Necrons. It has the usual build and play issues, but there's an interesting scenario in this one as well, which is called Battle for the Orb. So it talks about the Resurrection Orb, which is a key thing of Necrons, if you ask any Necron player. But the minis themselves are what we're really interested in, so let's have a quick look. Now, in these 10 issues, you'll get 10 assault intercessors, and it's basically the same sprue twice. So 2 issues later you'll come across these guys again, but what it has is it has a different kind of assembly guide. So in this particular one, it shows you how to build the sergeant. Now as you can see, it's an ultramarine sergeant because he has a red helmet, and there's also this kind of shoulder pauldron here at the front as well, which donates rank. And the pose of these minis is absolutely superb. I mean, that is it's just a fantastic sculpt from Games Workshop, in that you can see that he's literally charging headlong into battle. I mean, all of them now were very simple to paint, very easy to put forward, and because it's a Space Marine, you kind of, you'd be well practiced at this stage at painting Space Marines. But I have to say, these were great fun to paint, and there was such a great dynamic range of poses with it. I mean, these guys really stand out in the battlefield. It's like literally caught in a moment of time. It's not like the old Games Workshop where they're just standing with a bolter kind of in a parade formation. These are kind of like dynamic, movable and livable actual figures. They were all push fit and very easy to put together, and the beauty of course is that Space Marines can be done in any faction that you want. So unlike the other assault intercessors that were in the previous issue, I think issue 3, these guys have no symbols on the side of their pauldrons, so you can make it into whatever faction that you want. And of course they're all dotted with little kind of purity seals in different places, so that you can personalize your assault marines just that little bit more. So I have to say, this was a great little issue, and one definitely to look out for. Issue 14 comes with a munitorium container along with ammunition boxes and promethium barrels. Now this was the first of 3 sets of this sprue. Out of 6 issues, 3 of them were this exact model, 3 times over. So whilst it was a little bit boring to paint the same thing so frequently over a period of a couple of weeks, it was, however, a useful thing to get, because it allows players who are collecting this magazine to have a fair bit of terrain early on in their games. Now, as you can see, you get an awful lot of nice little bit of kits here. There's a bit of information on the Aldari, the usual build and paint with your containers, some terrain rules, but the interesting thing here is called Secure the Supply Drop. So when it comes to the actual games for Warhammer Imperium, you finally have one that has bits and pieces of terrain in it. Now, the terrain itself it's very easy to build. It's literally just a box. Now, I already have plenty of these from Warhammer Conquest, but nevertheless, it's an easy thing to build, it's an easy thing to paint, and you know what, if you want to experiment with things like battle damage, or, you know, kind of highlighting different brushes, or even a new paint scheme, it's not something that you can kind of, it's a model you can risk, because, you know, it's still just terrain at the end of the day, and it's something that doesn't have to be pristine. You get these little ammo boxes, which you don't even need to assemble them, you just cut them out. And of course you have little barrels, which are, you know, these are nice little things actually, because it comes with the Imperium Eagle symbol on it, and, you know, other little bits of pieces. Like, it's not just the bare old barrel, but it is a nice, impressive little bit of kit that has nice detail on it. But like I said, the only problem I had with this is that it came 3 times over in the next 6 issues. Now, issue 15 comes with 5 flayed ones, which are kind of basically flesh-eating Necrons. They're pretty cool, horrific monsters, and that they literally strip the skin and bones from their enemies and adorn it upon themselves. Quite creepy, but they were actually great models to assemble. Now, there's the usual kind of information. It goes into the detail about them. You have info on the Imperium Sanctus, you have some info on Chapter Command, and along with the usual how to build and how to paint, you have a unique mission called Destroy the Plasma Site, which uses the models that you get in this issue, of course, and uses the terrain from the previous issue, which is, of course, the Munitorium container. So let's have a look at the actual models themselves. Now, these things I thought were very impressive. They look very sinister. I mean, I had a bit of fun covering the skin in bits of blood and whatnot, like, so it's kind of like still wet and icky and gooey, but you can do anything you want with these. So I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be human skin. You could use, I presume, Tau skin or any type of skin that you want, but these things are hideous looking. They were very finicky to assemble. I mean, there's very Edward Scissorhands type of things, and you have to be careful when you are assembling them, because the hand here, of course, came into little bits, different little pieces, but these are just superb, horrific, monstrous looking things, and they look great on the battlefield. The only thing I would say as well is that they are, of course, not something I would throw loose into a kind of a plastic box for travel, because there's so many bits that kind of stick out, they'll catch and they'll break, and that would be a great pity, because they are just beautiful little models. But if you do get these, one paint I would advise you to get is called Blood for the Blood God, because you can just adorn the end of the scissors and bits of the actual skin that they adorn themselves with blood, and it just, I have to say, these were a real pleasure paint. It's not, if it wasn't for Hachette, I would never have picked these models up, but now that I have them, I am really happy with them, because they're just gorgeous looking things. Like, and I mean, even a thoroughly average painter with a little bit of Blood for the Blood God can have a nice, scary, sinister looking model from them. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is issue 15 of Warhammer Imperium. Now, issue 16 comes with 5 more assault intercessors. Now, this is the exact same sprue as the earlier issue. The only difference is that it has a different build guide. So these things originally came in the Indominus box set, and it was the same sprue twice over, and it just basically had a different plan for assembling what was there. So it's even if you don't get issue 16 and you can only get the other issue, you're not really missing out on much. It's just build variants for these models. Of course, this issue comes with some information on ranged weapon for the Necrons. It has some info on the Chaos Space Marines, and there's an interesting little bit of information on rules, movement rules, going up on top of containers, things like that. And also the mission is called Destroy the Warden. Now, as for the actual miniatures themselves, they are, again, very nice. You know, they're as good as the other ones. Same kind of dynamic pose that they're rushing. The only major difference is that the weapons arms are kind of swapped around a little bit. So even though the bodies are largely the same in their actual movement, the position of the arms gives a whole new pose for these miniatures, and they do, of course, again, come out quite well and quite nicely. So as you can see, the weapon arm here is similar to the other one that had the purity seal on the weapon. The sergeant, of course, also comes as another variant, that you have a head this time instead of the actual helmet, and the helmet is adorned here on his belt. So, I mean, the assault and successors are very good. Oh yes, the other really cool thing about this was the prosthetic arm, and I thought that was a really nice touch. He also comes with a plasma pistol, which is interesting in the games, because if you do, I think, a 1, if you roll a 1, the thing will blow up. So I'm guessing that's what happened to his previous arm. And of course, you have 5 of them, all very dynamic, interesting poses. I mean, and this one is brilliant, where he's literally rushing forward, sticking the bolter, firing as he goes. Lovely little miniatures, and if you do end up with a couple of issues, I mean, you could get a lot of assault intercessors for a very low price. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issue 16. Now issue 17, again, is more kind of terrain containers, the same thing that we had before. It has a bit of information on the injuries and grudges of characters like the Ultramarines, some information on outcasts such as the flayed ones, the worlds of the Imperium, so some more background information, the usual how to build guide, and the mission in this one is called Secure the Drop Site, where you get to use the actual terrain again. So it's pretty much the exact same as the previous container. I just decided to try and paint it a slightly different color, so I gave I think I gave this what's called Incubi Darkness. So like I said, this is, if you're kind of still learning how to paint properly like myself, this is a fun and easy way to at least experiment with different color schemes. So I wanted to see how kind of Incubi Darkness would come out on a larger scale. I wanted a little bit of darker ammo boxes, so I thought maybe these could be, I don't know, in my own headcanon, something for plasma weapons or whatnot. And it also gave me a chance to kind of experiment with different kind of barrels. So I mean, normally I went for the red and white. I tried green and white here, in terms of like that would be kind of more of your typical military color. But that was issue 17 and the second set of terrain. And the next issue, of course, is issue 18, which comes with a very interesting model, which is the Necron Technomancer. Now, the Technomancer is, I think, the cryptic commander, basically, that he's kind of in charge of a lot of the units that would repair other Necrons in the field. He's also something of a kind of an advisor to the Necron nobility, and it kind of maintains and creates new Necron technologies. Other information in the actual issue, of course, is some information on power armor. You've got some information on Drukhari, which are the evil space elves, and a nice little short story here, actually, called March of the Machines, where it kind of highlights the importance of technology in the grimdark future. There's also a little note here. So there was a playmat promised with this issue, but it's actually going to arrive later in issue 21, which is just a kind of a new playmat for you to kind of, you know, just basically play your games on. And the story in this one, of course, is, I think, the assassination of the Techromancer itself. Sorry, hunting the Technomancer, so that you basically get to see what he's capable of in a whole mission where the Space Marines are trying to take him out. So let's have a look at the actual model itself. Now, this is, again, another beautiful sculpt by Games Workshop. I mean, as you can see, he's literally flying in the air, and there's this kind of spider-like monster thing that I decided to assemble first and paint first before I kind of put the rest of him on top of it. Now, as you can see, I had a bit of trouble there, because you can see there's a tiny little bit of glue in the back, but that's my failing. He's just a superb little model. I didn't want to kind of highlight and go through the shading of a lot of the weapons, so I just opted for a very simple kind of edge green and kind of interior dark, and I let a little bit of the Tesseract glow go into the actual the grooves of the weapon itself. But he is a very, very dynamic model that stands out. He looks great, and from all intents and purposes is very powerful. So a beautiful little issue to get for a kind of a great little character that I would imagine will cost €30 on his own. So if you are a Necron collector and you're getting these out of order or out of sorts, issue 18 is one that's definitely to look out for. Now, issue 19 is the third of the containers, and I won't lie, I was kind of glad to finally get the last of them out of the way because I was sick of painting containers. It also has some interesting little information on the Manufactorum battle zones, basically what it's like to fight in them. It has some information on the Space Marine Reclusium, which is where they would kind of keep relics and kind of important things to the chapter. There's also some more lore on the Necrons and their awakening and kind of 1,000 empires, which is how many of them there are. There is the exact same how to build guide again for the third set of containers. And of course the mission is called War in the Manufactor, or War in the Factorum. But yeah, issue 19 is not the most interesting one, but like I said, the only good thing about getting the same thing 3 times over is that it gives you kind of scope for a little bit of experimentation. So I again went for a slightly darker color here. I think this was called Dark Reaper paint. So it allowed me to kind of, you know, in the future, if I want to kind of do different shades of blue for my Ultramarines or go for a sub-chapter of the Ultramarines, which are a darker blue, it gives me a kind of a practical look as what the color looks like. I mean, even here I decided to kind of, I think I was listening to something about the Imperial Fists, so I tried to see how the color yellow would work on some of these containers and barrels, and it actually surprised me that silver goes with yellow quite well. So perhaps if I ever get a section of Death Watch, or if I wanted to do a kind of a separate section of Imperial Fists or something like that, I might give their pauldrons a little silver color. So even though you're painting the same thing again for the third time, there's nothing stopping you from kind of, you know, using it as an opportunity to try different colors or different schemes on things, because at the end of the day, this is still terrain, and even if it's not the best looking terrain in the world, it still stands out. I mean, worst case scenario, you can just slap something like Agrax Earthshade or Null Nile all over it, and it can be just a kind of a dirty, dilapidated barrel. Now, issue 20, unfortunately, didn't come with any new models. It came with 2 new paints, but it is interesting in that it has a nice bit of lore in it. Now, the most significant thing in this issue, of course, is, as you can see, the Emperor. But it does talk, or it does show you how to kind of create an Ultramarines strike force with kind of, you know, information, standards, data sheets, whatever you need to do to kind of make one. It has some information on Necron Tomb Worlds. You have here the bit of blurb about the Emperor and the Golden Throne, which is a cornerstone of the whole lore of this universe. It has some technological boons for some of the Necrons. And you have, of course, 2 of the paints that you get with this issue. It shows you how to kind of highlight or use them in some of the models that you've been using earlier on. There's also reanimation protocols, which is extra Necron rules, and the actual scenario itself in this one is called Total War. So I think everything that you've gotten so far you use in the issues coming up. So just to sum up, this is everything you get in issues 11 to 20. You get 3 of the Munitorium containers, you get a load of barrels and ammo cans, you get the Technomancer, you get the 5 flayed ones, you get 10 Assault Intercessors, and the Librarian and Phobos armor. So an interesting 10 issues to collect. My only criticism in terms of the modeling aspect was doing this thing 3 times over. But everything else was interesting. There was 2 sets of sprues, so you had different variants of the Assault Intercessors. The Phobos Librarian was just a beautiful model. The Technomancer was a beautiful model, but my favourite model out of the last 10 were the actual flayed ones, which were just grim, horrible, sinister looking things, and pretty much are my favourite Necron units so far. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issues 11 to 20 of the Warhammer Imperium magazine. Please stay tuned in the future for issues 21 to 30, where some of the new interesting stuff that's coming out will be the Skitari, which is the Mechanicus faction in 40k. So until next time, this is Sean from the Lucky Roll. Good luck, God bless, and remember, praise the Emperor.